Hello, and Merry Christmas. Welcome to a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video where I'm going to be using our final Pokemon of Regicember, Registeel. And this is the third part to a three-part series, so if you don't want any spoilers for the previous two, I suggest watching those first. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to Registeel, and I think that Registeel is going to do amazing in this game. Now, the reason being is that it is a Steel type, which is one of the best types in the game defensively, and it starts with a pretty decent move. But let's first go over its stats. It has 80 HP, 75 attack, 150 defense, 75 special attack, 150 special defense, and 50 speed. So it finds itself as the middle ground for the other two Regis. Instead of having 200 in one defense stat and 100 in the other, it has 150 in both. And instead of having a 100 attacking stat and a 50 attacking stat, it has 75 in both. Unfortunately, this does make it weaker than both of the others because it doesn't have a preferred attacking stat. However, its defenses being middle ground on both does make it better defensively, I think, overall between the two, and that Steel typing is really going to help out a lot. Now moving on to its moves, it gets access to mostly normal and electric type moves, though it does get Earthquake and a few fighting type moves which could come in handy, as well as the move Ancient Power, which is always great, and Earthquake. Now unfortunately it does start with Metal Claw, and why I say it's unfortunate is because even though the base power is pretty good on it and it's not going to miss all that often, and it also has a chance to raise my attack whenever I use it, but it's a Steel type move, and unfortunately the Steel type has a lot of resistances offensively. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our Registeel in particular, which has a serious nature. And because the other two Regis had neutral natures, I decided to go ahead and set Registeel to a neutral nature as well, just to keep things consistent. And of course, it gets the Clear Body ability, just like the other two Regis do, preventing my stats from being reduced, which is very useful throughout the game. And by level 10, it gets Explosion and Metal Claw. So with that, let's go and get right into it. And just like the Regis before it, I'm going to pick up Seismic Toss, that way I can deal damage to things that I don't hit super effective, and I go into the battle against the old man. And Metal Claw should be enough to take down the Abra, though it does outspeed me, hits me with a Fire Punch, dealing it 10 HP. Metal Claw takes it down in a single hit, then out comes Shroomish. And unfortunately, Horsey being a water type, it does resist Metal Claw, so I decide to go for Seismic Toss into it. Though it can't really do anything to me in return, so I just keep going for Seismic Toss, and eventually it will go down. Now, one of the issues with Registeel, I think, that's going to come up is that it doesn't hit nearly as hard as the other two, so it might end up falling behind just because it's not outputting as much damage. Though I do think because it rides the middle ground, it's going to actually be able to use the special attacks that Regirock really couldn't. But anyway, let's go ahead and go into the battle against Power Rangers. And I decided to fight Purple today because I don't take any damage from their poison type moves, and I'm at least dealing neutral damage to all of them. Well, that is, except the Tentacle, I guess, but Seismic Toss should be enough to take it down in just a couple hits, which it is, but unfortunately it does hit a Supersonic, so I might be hitting myself in confusion, but because of my really high defense, it's not really going to do that much to me. Anyway, with all that being said, let's go and start just a little bit of rambling. If you are enjoying this video so far, consider liking, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. And also, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Now, I do still have a couple more videos that should be coming out before the end of the year, but seeing as this is kind of the end of this little series I've been doing, I just want to say thank you to everyone who stuck around this year, and everyone who just started watching this year. And, you know, I actually started looking away from the fight. I lose to Purple. Okay, well, I decided to go to Brown because usually it's just the easier fight. Anyway, back to what I was getting at. I am just very thankful that people still continue watching these videos, and I know this year has been a little turbulent, you know, some weeks are better than others. I've been really trying to get back to 2 videos a week, but I just missed my deadlines, and unfortunately I moved it on to the next week, which causes problems down the line. But anyway, we finally beat Brown, and we're able to get into the Cypher base, where at level 17, Registeel gets the move Curse, and then I go into the battle against Silverina, which leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly, and right away I'm going to use the move Curse, that way I can raise my attack to hopefully be able to one-shot some of her Pokemon, and so I go for Metal Claw into the Beautifly, and unfortunately it's not quite a one-shot, but that might actually be a good thing, because there is a 10% chance every time I use Metal Claw that my attack will be raised. But that unfortunately doesn't happen here. She then sends out Roselia, and because it doesn't resist Steel, I am able to take it down in a single hit, though not before it's able to set up Leaf Seed, which unfortunately gets transferred onto her final Pokemon, the Shadow Delcatty. I go for Metal Claw into it, and it is doing half, though unfortunately because it heals a bit, I'm not actually going to be able to take it down this turn without a critical hit, and unfortunately I'm taken down. However, there is a solution, and the answer is just to go back into the battle once again. Now, I do want to go ahead and stack 2 curses because everything on our team already outspeeds me anyway, and the extra attack should help offset the damage from Leech Seed. But on top of that, I am just a few experience points away from getting to the next level where I get a very powerful move. Now, on this attempt, I actually decide to take down Love Disc first because it's only going to be hitting me on the special side, and it's doing much more damage than Beautifly does. But at level 25, Registeel gets the move Super Power, which I decide to teach over Explosion, and it's a 120 base power fighting type move that should absolutely one-shot the Delcatty with a +2 attack. Now, there is a small downside to the move, and that is every time you use it, it lowers your attack and defense by 1 stage. Though, because I have the move Curse, I can more or less offset that other than the speed reduction I get from the move Curse. But anyway, I take down the Delcatty in a single hit, and then all that's left is Beautifly, where I know a single Metal Claw takes it down, and we beat Lorena. Now, of course, you can't have a Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness video without the obligatory Mirror B, but Mirror B is actually being very generous this year, and is allowing me to take his prized Voltorb. Thank you very much, Mirror B. I will accept this present and move on. At the Real Gam Tower, I pick up my 2 favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and at the same time I pick up the TM for Thunder because Regiceel is both a physical and special attacker, and I'm going to teach Thunder right away, and of course I'm going to teach Hidden Power right away, hoping for a decent Hidden Power type, and Registeel gets Hidden Power Dark, which definitely isn't too bad of a Hidden Power type, but the problem is that the Steel type Artis is both Psychic and Ghost type Pokemon, so Dark doesn't really add too much. So unfortunately, despite just learning it, at level 33, Registeel gets Ancient Power, and I decide to teach it over Hidden Power. Now going into the battle against Snettle, he leads with Quagsire and a Lantern, and I go ahead and call on the first turn because I want to raise the accuracy of Thunder. That way I can take down some of the Pokemon further down the line, and it actually does a decent amount of damage to Lantern as well, taking it down to half, and it hits again, taking it down, and then he sends out his next Pokemon, a Shadow Lunatone, and because I have Metal Claw, I might be able to take it down in a single hit. Okay, not quite, but it is very close. It could just be a range, but also I'm very close to a level up anyway, so if I do need to redo this battle again, it should be a one-shot on Lunatone. Anyway, because it wasn't a one-shot, it's able to set up Shadow Sky, which unfortunately does hurt Registeel quite a bit because one of its best features is the fact that it's very defensive, and unfortunately this is chipping it down quite a bit. It gets taken down to 21 HP, and the Fruity Pebbles take it down to 14, doing 7 damage each turn. Ancient Power finishes off the cast form, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, Matang. Now, unfortunately, I do get taken down to 1 HP by the Shadow Sky, so unfortunately I won't be able to win this attempt, but I can see how much Thunder does to Matang. Unfortunately, it's not quite a one-shot though. So I go back into the battle once again. This time I'm at full health, and I don't decide to go for Thunder right away. Instead, I'm going for Ancient Power, which is going to take a few more turns, but it also has a 10% chance to raise all of my stats by 1 stage, and if that does happen, I should be able to take down Matang in a single hit. Anyway, I don't get it on the Lantern, out comes the Shadow Lunatone, and of course it goes down to a single Metal Claw with a crit, and I also got the attack boost, so maybe I don't even need the Ancient Power anymore. Go for Metal Claw into cast form, not quite enough to take it down, though it does get it very low. And then I go for an Ancient Power. Maybe I can get one. Unfortunately, I don't. Then he sends out Matang once again. But now that I have the extra attack, I go for Super Power instead because it's the same base power. Unfortunately, even with it, it's still just a little too weak to finish it off. Go for Ancient Power to finish off the Matang, and then all that's left is Quagsire, which I decided to use Metal Claw a couple times to lower its HP low enough for Super Power to hopefully finish it off in a single hit. Though I think in hindsight I could have just gone for 2 superpowers and probably finished it off anyway. But it doesn't really matter because Quagsire goes down, and we move on to the next battle immediately against Gonzap. He leads with a Nuzleaf and an Electrode, and I go ahead and call on the first turn because Nuzleaf is going to go for Fake Out, and it gives me a chance to set up Thunder. I go for Metal Claw into the Nuzleaf, which unfortunately isn't quite enough to take it down, though I do get an attack boost. and Electrode is going for Sonic Boom, doing a set 20 damage, which is usually a good thing, but because Registeel is a very defensive Pokemon, it's likely going to be doing more damage than most of his other Pokemon would be doing. So I decide to take down the Electrode with Ancient Power. Unfortunately, because of its static ability, I do get paralyzed, which might cause this battle to go quite a bit slower and possibly lead to a loss. Go for Ancient Power into Vileplume and get the lucky 10% Omni Boost. And even though it's not going to fix my speed issue, it will allow me to survive a lot longer and hit a lot harder. So I go for Ancient Power to finish off the Vileplume, sending out his Whiscash. And while Superpower is definitely the best move to use against it, I want to preserve my attack boost, so I decide to go for Ancient Power. Unfortunately, I get paralyzed and decide I may as well go for Superpower anyway because he's only got one Pokemon left. Whiscash goes down and he sends out Skarmory. And because I called to raise my accuracy, Thunder should hit and take Skarmory down in a single hit, which it does. And then all that's left is the Nuzleaf, which can't really survive anything. I go for Metal Claw and take it down. So with that, we get an easy first try victory. And now inside the pyramid, I pick up the TM for Thunderbolt, which I teach over Thunder, and then soon after, I pick up the TM for Earthquake, which I teach over Metal Claw. And then I go into the battle against Scorrigan. He leads with a Celio and a Lairon, and on the first turn, I go for Ancient Power into Celio, which unfortunately does survive with just a little bit of HP left. I then go for Thunderbolt to finish it off, because Lairon really doesn't have anything that threatens Registeel at all. So it's better to just keep it alive for as long as possible. Go for Thunderbolt, taking down Slowking with a critical hit, which is very nice. And then he sends out Ursaring, go for Ancient Power into it. Not really doing that much damage, but it does have a fairly decent defense stat. Earthquake takes Ursaring down to low yellow. And unfortunately this turn it decided to go for Protect. I go for another Ancient Power to finish it off, and then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Primeape. Now that the first Shadow Pokemon is out though, I decide to go ahead and just go for Earthquake, taking down Lairon in a single hit, and dealing quite a bit of damage to Primeape, nearly taking it down in a single hit. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Hypno. And so I go for another Earthquake, taking down the Primeape, and getting a critical hit, taking the Hypno down in a single hit as well. So now moving into the final area of the game, and of course Registeel is doing great, but we'll just have to see if it can keep that going throughout some of the hardest fights in the game. Now moving on to Lavrina, she leads with a Gardevoir and a Gorvis. I go for Thunderbolt into Gorvis, taking it down in a single hit, and then she sends out Roselia. Now Roselia is going to just set up Leech Seed on the first turn, which is a bit annoying, so I decide to take it down. I get a crit, but it definitely was not necessary, and also take the Gardevoir down. She sends out her two Shadow Pokemon, Shadow Farfetch'd and Shadow Altaria, and I want to get rid of the Farfetch'd as soon as possible because I don't want to get confused. And then all that's left is Shadow Altaria, which Ancient Power should deal quite a bit of damage to it. It's not quite a one-shot though. Go for a second one to finish it off, and we beat Lavrina on the first attempt. Now at the top of the volcano, I run into Snaddle once again. He leads with Quagsire and Metang this time. I go for Earthquake, taking Metang down in a single hit and doing quite a bit of damage to the Quagsire. Then he sends out Scizor. Quagsire hits a Mud Shot, but because of the Clear Body ability, I don't have to worry about my speed being lowered. Go for Earthquake, taking it down, and then dealing quite a bit of damage to Scizor. And the thing is Scizor doesn't really have anything to deal effective damage to Registeel, so I can just ignore it more or less, and instead try to focus on the Shadow Solrock to take it down. Unfortunately, I'm not able to take it down in a single hit, so it does set up a Shadow Sky. Go for Thunderbolt to finish off, and then out comes Castform. Now at this point, I should be able to take them both down with a single Earthquake, though Castform might survive. And Castform is a bit of a threat because it has the move Flamethrower, but luckily it does go down, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Starmie. And even though it does outspeed me, there's no way it can take me down from this high health, so it goes for a Shadow Storm, and I go for Thunderbolt, taking it down in a single hit. So now moving on to Ardos, he leaves with a Swallow and Alakazam, and I go for Ancient Power right away to take down the Alakazam because it has Fire Punch. But unfortunately, it burns me on the very first turn, so after just a few turns of struggling, eventually Registeel goes down without even taking down a single Pokemon, which is just a bit unfortunate. Anyway, after this fight, I decide to go ahead and teach Protect over Superpower, and then I go back into the battle once again, now on the 4th attempt. And I forgot to press record right away, but I go for Ancient Power, taking down the Alakazam in a single hit, and Swallow sets up Shadow Sky. And luckily, I don't get burnt. I go for Ancient Power to take down the Swallow, which then he sends out his Heracross, and Registeel takes quite a bit from Hydro Pump. Now the thing about Hydro Pump is it only has 5 PP, so once I stall that out, the Kingdra is going to be forced to use the move Double Edge, which isn't going to do really any damage to me, and it's going to be damaging it. So as long as I can take down Heracross without getting taken down first by Brick Break, I should be in a good position. Now luckily the Shadow Sky actually chipped Heracross down far enough for 2 Ancient Powers to finish it off, and then he sends out his next Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Electabuzz. And luckily I do have Earthquake, which should take it down in a single hit, though I do decide to play it safe and go for a Protect just to heal up a bit before then. It does about 40 damage to me. I take it down, and Kingdra survives on just a little bit of HP. So unfortunately when he sends out his Shadow Snorlax, I won't be able to get the full amount of damage from Earthquake on it. However, I will be able to take down the Kingdra this turn, so I do just that. Snorlax nearly taken to half HP by Earthquake, so I think another one should finish it off. But it survives on red, it hits a Shadow End, reminding me just how tanky Registeel is, and I finish it off with Earthquake. Now with Ardos defeated, we move on to Gorgon, who leads with a Slowking and Ursaring, and I go for Thunderbolt into the Slowking right away, nearly taking it down in a single hit. It hits an Earthquake, not really doing that much damage to me. Go for an Earthquake myself, taking down the Slowking, and taking Ursaring down to low yellow. Then he sends out Aggron. Now I predict one of these is going to protect this turn, so I just decide to go for Earthquake anyway, taking down the Aggron. And then he sends out his Walrein. I go for Thunderbolt into it, hopefully enough to take it down in a single hit. It is. And then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Poliwrath. Now, Poliwrath is almost always going to set up Shadow Sky on the first turn, so I really want to stop that as quick as possible, which Thunderbolt takes it down, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Mr. Mime. And because of its low defense stat, it actually takes quite a bit from Ursaring's Earthquake, which allows me to use my own Earthquake to take it down and finish off the Ursaring. So with that, we move on to Eldis. He leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I go for Earthquake on the first turn to take down the Manectric right away. And unfortunately, because it moves faster, it did set up Shadow Sky, so I think it'd be wise to go ahead and stall out the Fruity Pebbles. That way, Salamence and his other Shadow Pokemon aren't getting the benefits of Shadow Sky. And luckily, because I have the Clear Body ability, Salamence can't actually lower my attack, so I can go for Ancient Power, which is doing over half, so I will be able to finish it off on a following turn. However, first, of course, I go for Protect, and then finally I go for the second Ancient Power, which does take down Salamence, but not before it hits a Shadow Rush, dealing more damage than I expected. Ancient Power gets a crit, finishing it off, and I get the 10% Omni Boost, which is going to be very helpful. Then out comes Flygon, and I don't really have a great move for it. Ancient Power is my only option because the other two it's completely immune to. So I go for Ancient Power, and because of the attack boost, it looks like it might be a 3-shot, though it is a bit hard to tell at this point. Now it does have Flamethrower, which is a bit unfortunate because there is always that chance to burn me, and that wouldn't be great for Flygon or the Pokemon coming after. But anyway, I go for another Ancient Power, but unfortunately, Flygon actually survives on just a sliver of HP, allowing it to hit another Flamethrower, though luckily still no burn. And eventually I'm able to finish it off, and then he sends out his next Shadow Pokemon, Shadow Marowak. Now, Marowak isn't going to be too much of an issue, but Earthquake definitely doesn't take it down in a single hit. Luckily, it does miss the Shadow End, and so I'm able to finish it off on the following turn. And then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Lapras. Now Lapras is always going to set up Shadow Sky on the first turn, so I get a free Thunderbolt, which actually takes it down in a single hit. All that's left is the Ninjask, and I go for Ancient Power to take it down. So with that, we now move on to the big box legendary, Shadowlugia, and I think Regiceel is actually going to do very well against it. Shadow Storm does still do quite a bit to it, and Thunderbolt really isn't doing as much as I was hoping, but I think I should be able to get out of this battle without too much damage done. Thunderbolt takes it down to low yellow, go for another Protect, and then one last Thunderbolt to finish it off, and it takes me down to nearly half. But anyway, with Shadowlugia defeated, we move on to the final boss of the game, Greevil, and he leads with a Shadow Moltres and Rhydon. And Shadow Fire is actually doing quite a bit more damage than I expected. I don't quite get the one-shot on Moltres, and Rhydon hits me at the Shadow End, dealing a devastating amount of damage. So I go back into the battle once again, but considering how close a one-shot Moltres was, I decided to go ahead and use up all the rest of my rare candies to get up to level 72, and then I can take down the Moltres in a single hit. But unfortunately, because my defenses are so high, some of his Pokemon are going to act a little strange, like Executor going for Shadow Hold instead of Shadow End, and usually that means that it's going to be going for Shadow Storm, which is definitely not great for Registeel. I decided to go for Ancient Power, which isn't really doing that much, and Executor is still just going for Shadow End. Oh, okay, well that's a bit interesting. Anyway, it misses a couple times, which is nice. Go for another Ancient Power, taking it down, and then he sends out Articuno, which might actually be a threat, though it is still 4 times weak to Ancient Power, so there is a chance it goes down a single hit. Though, just to be safe, I am going to stall out Shadow Sky, just because I don't want the extra damage. Articuno goes down in a single hit. He then sends out his final Pokemon, Zapdos, and Tauros decides to just trap me. I go for Ancient Power and it, which takes it down to yellow. Hits me with a Shadow Bolt, which doesn't really do all that much damage. Tauros sets up Shadow Sky once again, and unfortunately I run out of Ancient Power PP, though luckily Thunderbolt is enough to take it down, and then all that's left is the Tauros, which Thunderbolt takes it down below half. Shadow Rush hits, not really doing much damage at all, even with the Shadow Sky up, and one last Thunderbolt finishes it off. So with that, we beat Greevil on the second attempt. So now it's time to see how good Registeel did compared to the other Regis. Well, it beat the game at a time of 8 hours, 37 minutes, and 32 seconds at level 72, with 12 faints throughout the game, 7 of those to bosses, and 5 of those to random trainers. So I think overall, Registeel is definitely the most consistent of all the Regis, which you'd kind of expect seeing as it is the middle ground and it has the steel typing. However, because it has base 75 attacking stats, it does cause battles to drag out a little bit, which unfortunately does hurt it in the time just a little bit. It's still a very strong Pokemon in the S tier, but it couldn't quite reach the speeds that Regice has. But funnily enough, it actually finds itself right in the middle of Regirock and Regice, which I think is the perfect conclusion to Regicember. And I'm not even joking when I say it's right in the middle. It's 12 spaces away from Regice and 13 away from Regirock. So it's basically perfect. Now let's go ahead and go over the pros and cons of Registeel. First, of course, the 50 base speed, like all of them have, is always going to hurt it in the long run, and its attacking stats are a little bit lower than the other two, though it does have the freedom to either be a physical or special attacker, where Regice or Regirock were more or less forced to either be physical or special, so it was nice having that extra freedom, though unfortunately it does come with the drawback of being a bit weaker. So I think other than that, Registeel is incredibly powerful in this game. It just suffers from a few small things that slow it down. So with that, this concludes Regicember, so thank you for joining me on this adventure, and if you did enjoy this video, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Merry Christmas, and thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.